Okay, good afternoon, everyone. Today is our 2023, probably the 2023. Yes, for sure. That's the last section about the Zhuangzi study. And this year, I checked my calendar. I probably start from February, and this section will probably is the 11th section about Zhuangzi. And then I think this one is probably the best is the because I compile 10 stories, and then it would be you don't require any background, okay, to understand Zhuangzi's philosophy. So this one you can read as entry level. But for those who already know Zhuangzi, and I hope and I believe you will get something new, even the story you already know, and then you should be, I believe, that's my job. I believe you will still learn something more about Zhuangzi's story. So just 1 minute, let me share my screen. Okay, so just quickly go over our schedule. After we take a Thanksgiving break, and then take a Thanksgiving break, and today, December 2nd, we talk about Taoist stories from Zhuangzi. And the next week, SK is going to talk about Bhagavad Gita, okay, chapter 10. Basically, we are talking about the second part of chapter 10 with some exercise, and then to share. Okay, basically, it's if you read Bhagavad Gita chapter 10, I think that after verses 20, they talk about I'm the wind among purifier, I'm Rama among warrior, I'm the alligator among fishes, I'm the river Ganges among all rivers, this kind of thing. So SK wants everyone to read this one and think about that, what's the extreme, what's the ultimate of everything. Okay. And then he's going through for chapter 10 and with some exercise. So that will be next week. And the year end for 2023, CK is going to talk about Gu Hongmin. I believe, I guess most of people probably not heard about him, but he is kind of important scholar during the early 20th century in China. He is Western educated and back to China, become totally conservative, let's put it this way. And his title is A Case Study, The Spirit of Chinese People. That's one of his famous essays. And then, then we will take a break, and to 2024, we will start on January 13th, which will start from Steve doing the introduction of Go Get. Okay, that's the starting. Then we will continue. So thank you, everyone. And then we will start today. So I just quickly run through, and okay, the book I follow is Feng Youlan. Okay, this book Zhuangzi, and this book cover from the inner chapter. Okay, chapter 1 to chapter 7, and we spend the most of this year. Basically, we read word by word, okay, to the all these chapters. And then today I'm going to make an easy work. So we talk about Taoist story from Zhuangzi, this book. Not only from that book, but from the entire Zhuangzi book. Let me show you. Okay. So for those who doesn't know, okay, Zhuangzi, just a brief introduction. When I write Zhuangzi as 2 words, I mean the person. But when we write Zhuangzi as 1 word, that means the book. And this book includes 3 parts. First part, inner chapter, from chapter 1 to chapter 7, which we go through most word by word. this year. Let's believe it's written, was written by Zhuang Zi, the person, the philosopher. Outer chapter from 8 to 22nd, we believe was written by Zhuangzi's disciples. And the miscellaneous chapter from 23rd to 33rd, we believe because from the later people who add on. Today I choose 10 stories, 10 I will consider most famous stories from the book Zhuangzi, the 33 chapters. It will include, most of the part. So that's today. And then quickly go through, okay, this book, history. The Zhuangzi has been written 4th century, okay, BC, okay, so it's about 2,400 years ago. And then today's Zhuangzi with some commentary, which is by Guo Xiang, okay, Guo Xiang. So Guo Xiang, just like if you're familiar with Western philosophy, Avicenna is a great commentator to Aristotle. Okay. Same as Guo Xiang is a great commentator of Zhuangzi. So he, just like most of the commentators, they put their own philosophy there. So whenever you see the red text, that means that's Guo Xiang's opinion, Guo Xiang's philosophy, who lived about 500-600 years after Zhuangzi. And Feng Youlan is the main translator. I basically follow his translation. He also put his own opinion on that. So I put in the blue text. So when you see the blue text, that means that's Feng Youlan's opinion on that. And Feng Youlan is in the 20th century philosopher, educated in Colombia, the student of Zhang Zi, and then back to China. And that's his story. So quickly go through what's the 7th chapter in the inner, 7th chapter in the inner chapter. And we already go through all of this one. I'm not going to through this one, and then I just include in the presentation file. So you can download from the meetup page, and then that's for your reference. And I hope after today's meeting, you will have an interest to go back to study Zhuangzi. So before I move on, is any question, comment? Since I have no co-host today, so if you have a comment, please raise your hand. If you put in the chat, I'm not able to see it. So before Thanksgiving in November, we talk about the book, I call it the 10-point summary from Feng Youlan. So that's Feng Youlan's introduction. So Feng Youlan summarized 10 main points about Tao and the De, and the theory of letting alone, the art of living, equality of things, life and death, immortality, pure experience. He summarized 10 points. And we already went through that one. And I put all of our Zhuangzi's reading in the following playlist in YouTube. When you got the presentation file, and then you can go to the YouTube to go through it if you are interested to know more about Zhuangzi. So that's about Feng Youlan's 10 points. And today I try to do is go through the 33 chapters, and I find try to talk about the 10 most, I would say 10 most famous story, okay, from all these 33 chapters, but not everyone. So of course, the most famous one, the first one, the butterfly dream from chapter 2, the skillful cook, or sometimes we call it the cook thing, okay, from chapter 3, okay, and the Liezi, okay, this one is from chapter 7, And the Mandarin just asked why I include this one. Because this one is in chapter 7. And when I talk about chapter 7, I skip this part because this story is a little bit long. So I don't have time to include this story in when I talk about chapter 7. So I decided to talk today. So I will make sure we spend a good time talk about this story. And the mountain tree, this one in the chapter 20, I think this one was related with chapter 4, which is so-called the human world. And this story also important talk about the usefulness and the uselessness. Chapter 5, 6, 5 and 6. Okay, that's from chapter 7. The story 5 and 6 talk about in chapter 7. Most famous is the happiness of fish. That's the ending of chapter 7. I think 2 years ago we talked about this, but we were going to revisit this one as a story and then see how we understand this one. Then the rest will be the death of Zhuangzi's wife and the death of Zhuangzi himself. I will cover this one, and I hope we have time to cover all this story. And then the translation I use, most I use Feng Youlan's translation, but for later part, some I use Lin Yutang's translation and James Lake's translation. That's like James Lake's translation is very old translation, but some are very good. And of course, I made some modification, about the translation. So before I really go to the story, I would like to talk about how to read Zhuangzi. Okay. So there's many ways to read Zhuangzi, and I showed this one last time. Basics, that's the reference I use. And then for those who doesn't speak or know Chinese, this then may not help you a lot. But one thing I like to share is most part I use Feng Youlan's translation because he wrote the translation and interpretation in English, and he was educated in America. So he has used a better way to make Western reader understand. The other person, Cai Biming, is a National Taiwan University professor. She basically read Zhuangzi as maintaining good health, how to live a good life in this point of view. Okay. Du Baorui is another young professor, and he also from National Taiwan University. He study is basic from the Chinese philosophy point of view. Jin Jiaxi is a very old professor, and the basics his study is very different. He studied Zhuangzi as a literature and the phonetics. So his book and his lecture is very difficult to follow because he just go word by word, okay? Character by character. So that's a different way of reading. And then again, Guo Mingyi is a religious leader. Okay, he passed away 2 years ago, and the basics he is teach Zhuangzi as he didn't call it Zhuangzi, he calls it the true text of Southern China, okay, and totally treat Zhuangzi, this book, as a religious book. So his teaching sounds more like in the church you hear the preach. Okay. So that's a different way to read it. So after you find the secondary source to understand Zhuangzi, you probably will find out that, they have many different ways to read it. And then, of course, in my section, because I'm interested in philosophy, so most what I'm doing is taking the philosophical point of view and just like to mention everyone. It's not the only one. That is not the only way to read. So before I go to the first story, okay, so I will pause for 1 minute if you have any question before I go to the story. Or any comment or any story you think that's important, you don't want to miss. So I probably have to assume there's no one have any question or comment at this moment. Okay. So I did no surprise. The first story I put it is the butterfly dream. And I think that's the most famous one. Before this meetup, I just play with ChatGPT. I asked ChatGPT to tell me a joke about Zhuang Zi. So the first talk about butterfly, and I asked him to regenerate. It's another butterfly and another butterfly. So that means that's probably the most famous story about Zhuang Zi, and the kind of like most of people associate the Zhuang Zi with this butterfly dream. And I also have one person told me, he said he know this story since he was 10 years old. I said, how come you know this when he was 10? And he was educated in Korea. And he said they have the multiple choice test. Then the question is, which philosopher dreamed about butterfly and they got confused? And he's a person or butterfly? And they have the Confucius, Zhuangzi, and Socrates, or whatever, and you have to choose. So let's see how famous of this story. So let's go to the detail of this story and then see how we understand this one differently if we can. Okay. So the text, even is so famous, the text, I just showed the Chinese text, just this long. I think so less than probably 30 character, just this short. And then this story show up on chapter 2. Okay. The chapter 2, the title is The Equality of Things. And then if you remember, this chapter is very long and very difficult to read. And to the very end, Zhuangzi put this story to the end. So let me read this story. Okay, I just want to mention the Chinese text here is very famous, and then it's very beautiful written. Okay, so most of people educated have a good Chinese literature education should be able to recite this text. So once upon a time, Zhuang Tzŭ, okay, so Zhuang Tzŭ is Zhuangzi's full name, dreamed that he was a butterfly. A butterfly fly about, enjoying itself. It did not know what it was. Zhuang Tzŭ. Suddenly he awake, and veritably was Zhuang Tzŭ again. Okay, so remember to talk about we. Okay, in Chinese it doesn't say who. Okay, so when we say Zhuangzi is confused, could be wrong. Okay, because there's no subject. So we do not know whether it was Zhuang Tzŭ dreaming that he was a butterfly, or whether it was a butterfly dreaming that it was Zhuang Tzŭ. Between Zhuang Tzŭ and the butterfly, there must be some distinction. This is a case of what is called transformation of things. Chinese called 物化. Okay. So I don't know anyone want to talk about this story, and how do you think about this story? If you want to share, and how do you think about this story? The story is simple, and then Madeline, please.
Yes, this one strikes me also as being on a deeper level, that there is continuity here, and the continuity is the consciousness. Whether it's the consciousness of the butterfly or of Chuang Tzŭ, it's still one continuous consciousness, whatever it believes itself to be at the moment. There's still some perceiving core in both forms.
Thank you. Okay. Krim, please. There's no right or wrong, okay, because Chinese scholar debate for several years, and there's nothing right or wrong. Go ahead, Krim, please.
Yes. So I probably have not so much a comment as a question here. And it's probably will sound like a silly question, but I think it's more of a cultural reference that I'm trying to understand. Because it was written, long time ago, and just the selection of this particular form, which to me sounds like it's very metaphorical, but I wonder if back then in those times people actually thought that butterfly can literally have a dream, such a vivid dream of a person who is actually like philosophizing about things. Or is it from the standpoint of the writer, it's strictly speaking a metaphor?
I don't know exactly the answer, but I believe people think about the animal or butterfly have a thought, either metaphorically or, it's no surprise because based on the book of Zhuang Zi, okay, he talk about things like animal, okay, the turtle will talk something, monkey will say something, okay, so they all personifies animal. Okay, so I would assume that's a common. You can take this one as a metaphorically, or you want to take about whatever. And there is no surprise, right? It's almost the same time in Greek, the Aesop fable, also the animal also talk. So I believe they just assume they can talk, or that's my understanding. Rohit, right? Or Rohit?
I wanted to actually agree with Madeline. I mean, I think what she said made sense to me. I think that John Perry, retired professor from Stanford, has written a lot about the issue of identity, and maybe at some stage, some of us might be interested in going through his writings. But I would say that what I think substantiates the way I understand Madeline's comment is that it was the same person who was dreaming that he was a butterfly and the same person who dreamt that he was Chuang Tzŭ, right? I mean, for example, if the story was Chuang Tzŭ dreamed that he was a butterfly and some other butterfly dreamed that it was Hamlet, we would not feel no need to identify the two stories at all. And the fact that we are identifying these two stories, the dream of Chuang Tzŭ and the dream of butterfly, means that there is something in common. And of course, coming from India, one would say, well, what is in common is the notion of soul. Maybe Plato would go along with the notion of soul. I don't know whether Taoists believe in soul or not.
Thank you to bring up from different background, and that's very interesting. So again, any other opinion, because there's nothing about right or wrong, And I'm going to share what I'm reading, but again, I'm reading this one as based on the text, okay, and I try to understand what the text try to tell us. Okay, so I agree. I see the formula and the translation. The key is the transformation of thing. So basics. If we look at the entire chapter, the long chapter, chapter 2, the Zhuangzi want to tell us is equality of things. That means everything they are not the same, but they are equal. Okay, so I think this one, Zhuangzi tried to prove, okay, a butterfly dream about it's become a man, and the man dream about it's become a butterfly. During the dream, you don't know, okay, you are really a man or butterfly. So I don't think Zhuangzi is confused. Here is a proof that butterfly and the man are different, and they have way to transform. Okay, the butterfly can transform to man. Either you want to talk about its consciousness, or you call it Atma. Okay, if you take the Brahman, okay, take the this kind of point of view. But basics, the story want to tell us is that's the proof. Since you cannot know, it's butterfly dream about man or man dream about butterfly, then that's the proof. There's no difference, and they have a way to transform. I think that's the story try to tell us, and that's my understanding this story, the purpose of this story.
Can I jump in with a thought here?
Please, Steve. Yeah.
Yeah, so this is amusing, but looking at this here, when you say the butterfly dreaming that it was Chuang Tzŭ, okay, forgive me if I'm mispronouncing the name, but
Correct.
so yeah. I'm trying to in my head, and I it's probably not necessary for this story here, or at least the point you're trying to get across. The thing is, at what level is it dreaming that it is Chuang Tzŭ? It is just the physical presence. It sees itself as that man just physically, or at the thought level, at the consciousness and thought level. That's when I looked at that, I was thinking it dreams as Chuang Tzŭ. Does it just see itself as a physical entity, or actually the physical entity with all the thoughts and everything that goes with that?
Great comment. And I if you ask me, I will say in their mind, they think they physically change it. So that's my comment. But of course, it's no solution here.
Yeah.
Thank you so much. Klim. After Klim, we probably will move on to the second story.
Right. I'll be brief. I'll probably reiterate what already was suggested by other folks. So to me, there's also this like a slight hint, maybe not so slight, in this paragraph, in parable, to the illusory nature of reality. And it's like, whether reality is a dream, or is it virtual or not. And that has clear parallels to the Indian thought as well, which we'll probably see more in Buddhism. But this one is sort of in the kind of this, touches on the same topic of the illusory nature of reality.
Yeah, I would say probably most of people read this one will get this idea. Okay, it's a reality and the yama, this kind of concept. Okay, but well, I'm not saying I disagree, but I would say I probably try too hard to separate the Taoism and the Buddhism philosophy. Okay, let's put it this way, because they don't know Buddhism. So of course, they also implied this world is an illusion. And later on, we can see more detail when we talk about a story about Zhuangzi's wife when she died, and what Zhuangzi talk about this. We talk about life and death. So we will see. This one also related to.
Right, and maybe it's not a statement, and maybe it's just like a question, like an open-ended question.
Yeah, of course, there's a lot of open-ended question, and that's why we have the discussion section here. So let's move on, and then this story, so-called the skillful cook, and sometimes translated as a cook din, okay, cook din or cook din, cooking guy. Okay, so that's also the second most famous story, because I think if you know these two stories, and then then you can claim most of the story, because that's the two most famous stories. So again, this writing is very beautiful writing, and it's not. It takes about 50% or more than half of chapter 2, chapter 3. Zhuangzi's inner chapter. Chapter 3 is about the cultivation of life. Okay, talk about how to take care of yourself. So, and then most of this book, this chapter is talking about this story. So we will say this story is the key to understand Zhuangzi's philosophy about cultivation of life, or you want to call it taking care of self. Okay. So the story is run like this. Prince Wenhui's cook was cutting up a bullock. Every blow of his hand, every heave of his shoulder, every tread of his foot, every thrust of his knee, every sound of the rendering flesh, every note of the movement of the chopper were in perfect harmony. Okay, that's kind of poetic description, rhythmical, like the dance of the mulberry groove, and the simultaneous like the chord of Jing Tzŭ. Okay, these two mulberry groove and the Jing Tzŭ are the ancient music, and you can read as classic music, beautiful music. Okay, so you can imagine, when the cook cutting up a bullock, you feel like he's dancing and with certain reason. So the prince said, admirable, that your art should become so perfect. Okay, so here, some comment. Okay, cook. A lot of translation call it the cook ding. Okay, but in Chinese called pao ding, right? And then the pao ding, the meaning of pao ding actually means ding means the guy. Okay, the labor, the person who do the work. So actually, the proper translation should be a cooking guy. Okay, so he has no name. We only know he's just a chef for the in the royal court. Then the cook laid down his chopper and replied, "What your servants love. So what I love is Tao." Remember, he's talking about Tao, not cooking. Okay, which is most advanced than art. So here talk about Tao and art. So look like he has, on the surface, look like he has a good skill like art, but he's talking about Tao. Here has a key concept here about Tao. In Zhuangzi, which we categorize him as a Taoist philosopher, we talk about Tao as the end. In Confucius, okay, Confucius also talking about Tao a lot, but in Confucius, Tao is the way, okay, is a means to the end. Unlike Taoism, the Tao is the end, not the means. So I think that's why he's talking about what your servants love is Tao, which is not advanced, okay, than art. When I first began to cut up a bullock, okay, what I saw was simply whole bullocks. After 3 years of practice, I saw no more bullocks as wholes. At present, I work with my mind, but not with my eyes. The functions of my senses stop. My spirit dominates. So he is using mind, not eyes. He doesn't use the senses, but he uses his spirit. Following the nature fiber, I would like to have a further explanation here. Following the nature fibers, my chopper slips through the great cavities, slides through the great opening, taking advantage of what is already there. I did not attempt the central veins and their branches and the connectives between flesh and bone, not to mention the great bones. So here the cook is describing how he moved the chapter. Okay, if you look at the text, Zhuangzi used a lot of anatomic term. Okay, 细、环、肯、序. Okay, they all ancient anatomic terms. Okay, so Zhuangzi in this chapter are very careful. Okay, pay a lot of attention on human body. Okay, so it's not like totally spiritual. He put a lot of emphasis on human body. And another here talking about, I translate as natural fibers. Okay, in Chinese called 天理. Okay, that's the interesting way to look at it. Okay, if we look at the Li, this word, okay, it means the muscular fiber. Okay, that means that. So here the translation should go with, because he is moving the blade, the chopper. So he cut the meat through following the nature. 天 is nature, okay, fiber, muscular fiber. So that's how we do it. So here we translate as nature fiber, but the same word 天理 in the later time, say 1500 years later, in the Confucian school, Confucian, or you technically we should call Neo-Confucian school, the same word 天理 has been interpreted, okay, as heavenly principle. So you will see the same word, okay, one in Taoism and in Confucian have become totally different meaning. Here in Taoism, in Zhuangzi's thinking, you should follow the nature fiber, imply follow the nature way to move along. But in Confucian thinking, the nature way becomes the highest principle. Okay? So you need to follow, both follow, but Zhuangzi, the purpose of following is to preserve your life. But Confucius thinking about following heavenly principle is not to save your life, is to preserve the virtue. And that also means you will sacrifice your life to preserve this virtue. Okay. So you will see they are from the same source, but sometimes become different teacher. Madeline, you have comment?
Yes, thanks, Jason. Thanks for going through it in such detail. I love it that he's really cooking guy. It somehow is just perfect.
Okay.
I have and I also like the progression of Tian Li.
Okay.
I was wondering if the word Li in this, is that the same word that refers to the grain of things that would be in wood and jade and things like that? Is that the same Li?
Yes, the same when we talk about the jade, right? The jade have the pattern, right?
Yes.
Okay, so that's the same word. Okay, and then also you can see the same word also means so this word you also can translate as a pattern. And when you talk about the muscle or anatomy, right, it become a nature muscle pattern. Okay, let's put it this way.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Okay, so let's go through. Okay, so right now the common cook. Okay, we don't know what's his name. Okay, but the chef. Okay, he continue to talk about since the prince is asking question. Right, a good cook change his choppers once a year because he cut An ordinary cook changes his chopper once a month because he has. Now, my chopper has been in use for 19 years. It has cut up several thousand bullocks, yet its edge is as sharp as if it just come from the whetstone. At the joint there are always interstices, and the edge of the chopper without thickness. If we insert which is without thickness into the interstice, there is certainly plenty of room for it to move along. Okay, here, move along, actually, the word used is you. Okay, so that means he is talking about the space is so small, but the blade has no thickness. So they have enough room to move along. Remember this word, move along, another way to translate is excursion, wander. Okay, the happy wandering, chapter 1. Basically, he's talking about there's enough room to move around. Nevertheless, when I come to a complicated joint and see that there will be some difficulty, I proceed anxiously with caution. I fix my eye on it, I move slowly, then by a very gentle movement of my chopper, the part is quickly separated and yet like earth crumbling to the ground. Okay, that's he's talking about how he do his work. Okay, then finally he talk about then he, okay, the cook standing with the chopper in my hand. Okay, he talk about, and I look around with an air of triumph and satisfaction. Then I wipe my chopper and put it into my seats. Okay. Excellent, the prince said. Okay. From the word of this cook, I learned the way of cultivating life. So the interesting is the comment from the prince, right? The prince didn't say, oh, good job. You did a beautiful job. What he learned from here is cultivating life. So we can put this one in thought process. If somebody perform this kind of skill to you, and would you learn the cultivation, how to cultivate your life? Okay. So I think that's a question, we should ask, right? Why he has this answer and why this story has been put in chapter 3 as the major part. Okay. And the topic is cultivation of life. So any comment? Anyone want to talk about this story? That's the end of this story. Klim, please.
Yeah, the one comment, it actually strikes me how metaphorical the language is here and in other parables as well. And I think there's probably like a lot of, I should call it like play on words, but maybe not so much. It's just basically using words in different contextual meanings. And it looks like, how the expertise or the skillfulness that is described as that, maybe the bull that doesn't even feel the pain after the whole process is done. So maybe somebody could add later on and say, hey, this person is so skillful, he goes through his life so in such a skillful way that he does not cause any harm, even though he gets through the heart of the matter.
Okay, so that's the way to explain why the prince talk about it's a cultivation of life, because it's the no pain for the bull. Mandarin, please.
Yeah, I don't want to slow things down. This might be a question or comment for the end of the story, if we're not at it yet. That when I first came across this story, I looked at the ox as the body of the world. the big fleshy, material thing that is all around us. And how do we move through that and navigate through that? But in previous discussions about the story, someone has pointed out that this was about Wei Wu Wei, and that the work can indeed be very hard, but it doesn't involve extra effort. In other words, it's like a skilled woodcutter. It's still work, they're still sweating, but they're not wasting a lot of energy with wild swings of the axe. And then the ox could also be seen as the world, but also the Tao as embodied in the world. And so not the chef, but the knife itself might be the De. So maybe you could talk a bit about Wei Wu Wei and De, and I'm sure there are other people here who know more than I do about it all.
Okay, so thank you, Mandarin. Okay, I will read this one based on what in the context of the chapter. So I agree with you on the if we can look at the cow, okay, the ox as the entire world, and if you look at the entire world or look at the ox, there's a lot of space, right? Look like a big monster, big huge amount of meat, meat and flesh and the bone and the tendon, but they still have a lot of space. And if we as a person move along, as the braid of the chapter move along, and then for 19 years, the braid is as sharp as from the beginning, you never change your. I think that's what the prince is talking about. And this chef, this cook, have never mentioned by his name or his last name. I think that's also important because he just a regular or a good cooking guy. He probably when he is performing all this one, the prince probably not pay attention to this cook. His attention is on the knife. So that's why he's talking about, okay, I learned the ways of cultivating life, because he's talking about the knife can survive for a long time. That's what I read on this one, So, Steve, please.
Yeah, I suppose on this one I focus more on the skill rather than the beast itself. The beast is, a metaphor for making your way through the world. And if you know how the world works, if you're following the Tao, you're following the natural curves of the beast, your skill will cut right through it. If you don't pay attention to that, you end up hacking your way through and dulling your knife. So I suppose I focus on the skill aspect of it, and it is a skillful. It's working your way through life by understanding the shape of things.
Thank you, Steve. Any other comment before I move to the next story? Next story is a little bit long. Clint, please.
Just a very brief observation that a cutting instrument is a metaphor for the mind, probably in many cultures, and even in our modern days culture. So I think it's a very keen observation there, and I think it is about the mind, and which is where the skillfulness is coming from, and it's also the mind that when we use, let's say, rationally, that we dissect things, we dissect nature, we philosophize using our minds. So there's a lot of it's like a very charged, terminologically speaking, very charged concept and a metaphor there as a cutting tool.
Thank you, Clint. Any other comment? And here is nothing right and wrong, and then we just share how do we see this one. And the purpose is we heard about a lot about this story and other story, and the reason I present this one is to present the original text, and let's read the original text, and then you see how it works. Okay. Madeline, and then we'll move on.
Yeah, now this reminds me, all these comments. What are the radicals in the word for me or I?
What's the radical?
Yeah, I think, didn't we discuss one time in a meetup the radicals were hand and knife?
Okay, so you talking about which word?
Me or I? It might be woe.
Okay. During this time, they don't use the word. Yeah, I don't know. Be honest, I don't know what's the radical for 我, okay, or I, okay. So here he used the words 无, okay, 无闻庖丁之言. That's the prince talk about himself. Okay. That's the word for I. And the radical is 口, which is the mouth. Okay. So I don't know what that means. Unfortunately, I don't know. Probably will come out a better answer next time. Anne, please.
Yes, my comment was really on the tail of Klim's, just to throw in the word reductive or reductivism to what he put forth, the notion of, so the beast is relevant in terms of how it can be utilized by the human, right? And that the cutting, that we always reduce things in order to understand and utilize. So it's kind of, again, was building more on Klim's comments.
Thank you, Anne. Okay, so I know we can have more comment, and then but let's move on for the third story. Okay, so someone asked about why I include this one, because this one is important. It's in chapter 7. The chapter 7, the translator Feng Youlan called it the philosopher king. Basics. This one is Zhuangzi's political writing. Okay, and this one is talking about how to be a king, how to be a Taoist king. So here, Zhuangzi put this story on that. A little bit long, but I think that's important. And so let's please put this one in the background. Think about it. Okay, how does it relate to being a king? And on the surface, you will see the name called Liezi. Liezi appear in the chapter 1 we talk about, and Liezi is famous in the Taoist religion, okay, because he is one of the most famous so-called immortal. Okay, he has a lot of spiritual force. Let's put this one. And in chapter 1, Zhuangzi even talk about he can travel around the world in short time, okay, and doesn't have to eat. So he's immortal, put this way. And this one kind of talk about how he Liezi become immortal. So let's see this story. Okay, in the state of Zheng, okay, that's a small state during that time. There was a wonderful wizard. Okay, this wizard could be, you can see as a fortune teller, and more precisely, he is a physiognomist, right? He can look at the people and tell the fate of the person. Physiognomist. He knew all about man's birth and death, gain and loss, misfortune and happiness, long life and short life, predicting the year, the month, the day with supernatural accuracy. Okay, think about this kind of person, how you want to see him or you don't want to see him. So the people of Zheng used to flee at his approach, right? People don't want see him because actually if somebody are so accurate to predict your death, and I believe, I don't want to see this person. Right? Liezi went to see him. Okay, it's different. He went to see him, and then Liezi went to see him and was fascinated. On his return, he said to Huzi, okay, here talk about Huzi is Liezi's teacher. Okay, he talked to his teacher. I used to consider your doctrine, my master, okay, as perfect. Now, I know someone more perfect still. So Liezi is very naive student, right? So he think, oh, my teacher Huzi is the best. And one day he see this Ji Xian, okay, Ji Xian is the wizard. He said, oh, this Ji Xian is better than you, okay? So the teacher told Huzi, the teacher told Liezi, so far I have told you the literature of my doctrine, but not its essence, okay? Do you think that you are in possession of it without cuts in your poultry yard? What sort of egg were the hens lay? Okay, that's an interesting metaphor, right? He compared as a doctrine, just an egg. And then the essence of the doctrine is like a sperm. So you need the sperm to fertilize the egg, then you have a chicken, right? So, so that's, I think that's an interesting metaphor about doctrine and essence. You displayed your doctrine to the world in order to get credit. That is the reason why the man can interpret your physiognomy. Bring him with you and show me to him. Okay. Next day, Liezi went to Ji Xian to see Huzi, bring the wizard to see the teacher. And when they come out, Ji Xian said, alas, your master is a dead man. He will not live, not for 10 days more. I saw something strange about him. He looked like wet ashes. Liezi went in and he wept until his front jacket was wet and with his tears. He crying, he's so sad because this wizard is so accurate. And when he said, your teacher is going to die, he knows he's going to lose his beloved teacher. So he's so sad, start to cry. And then he told Huzi what the wizard had said. And Huzi, the teacher, said, I showed myself to him the form of earth. Okay, here get a little bit mystical, and he told Chinese called Di Wen, the form of earth, which represent the tranquility, okay, according to Guo Xiang and Feng Youlan's interpretation. Okay, that's like earth. I was naturally immovable like a mountain, though I made no artificial attempt to be immovable. He probably saw me with my natural function close up, try to bring him again. So the second day, okay, next day, accordingly, Liezi brought the wizard again to see Huzi. When they went out, the wizard said, it is fortunate for your master that he met me. He's better. He's perfectly alive. I see that the closing up of his natural function is only temporary. So that means the teacher will not die. Okay. And then the Liezi was happy. Okay, went in and told Huzi and said, the Huzi, the teacher said, I showed myself to him the form of heaven. Okay, before he showed him the form of earth, and right now he showed the wizard the form of heaven. Fame and the real gain do not enter my mind. My natural functions spring forth from the depths of my being. He probably saw me with my natural function in full activity. Try to bring him again. Okay, so here, the heaven, the form of heaven represent activity. So before Liezi, Huzi, the teacher, showed the wizard the tranquility. Right now, he showed him the activity. That's why, the wizard think, oh, he's alive again. So next day, Liez came again with the wizard to see Huzi, to see his teacher. When they went out, the wizard said, your master is never the same. I cannot understand his physiognomy. Wait until he has become normal, and then I will examine him again. So here, he cannot understand, Huzi is different. Okay, Liez waited and told Huzi. Huzi said, I showed myself to him in a great harmony, Chinese called Tai Chong, okay, great harmony, in which nothing is superior to anything. He probably saw the balance of my natural function, where the water poured about from the swishing of a he called it a swishing of a dugan. Okay, I think the translation called dugan, Niheng, actually is a great salamander. Okay, that's the big fish in the river. There is a whirlpool there where it is a form of checking of the flow. There is a whirlpool where it's he talk about the water flowing, and then all this one. Basically, he's talking about the balance between tranquility and activity, just like water flowing, it looks like it's moving, but water still water. That he tried to talk about. Then the next day, Liez come again with the wizard to see Huzi. But before he had to settle himself, the wizard in his position, the wizard lost control to himself and ran away. And Huzi said, pursue him. Liez did so, but he cannot catch him. He returned and told Huzi, to his teacher, he disappeared, he lost. I could not catch him. So the teacher tell him the lesson. I show myself to him with change without losing essential. He keeps changing himself. I flexibly follow him with emptiness. Okay. So here he's talking about he is changing with what the wizards observe. Okay. If the wizard want to see a snake, he see a snake. The wizard want to see a dragon, he see a dragon. Okay. That's what he meant. Okay. I do not know who is who and what is what. In accordance with thing, I change. In accordance with thing, I flow. Therefore, he run wrong. So he never see this situation according to the interpretation from Guo Xiang and Feng Yulan talk about that's the activity in tranquility. That's how he deal with this. So finally, Liez learned a great lesson, right? On this, Liez was convinced he had not yet acquired the real learning. So what he learned is just the egg, the doctrine, right? Without essence, like no sperm for the egg. So he returned his house. For 3 years. He did not go out. He cooked for his wife. He fed the pigs as if he were feeding men. So he treat animal, wife, everything the same, so there's no different. He understands, this world is totally different. Okay, he forgot the distinction between social position between man and animal. That's from Feng Yulan's comment. Okay, he has no spatial spatial predilection for any particular kind of work. So he considered everything as equal. He discarded the artificial and reverted to the nature. He stood in the world like a cloud of earth. Amidst confusion and disturbance, he maintained with the one to the last. So that's how Liez become a Taoist, okay, an immortal. Okay. So of course, we cannot go very detailed, and I don't know, because unless we want to read as religious thinking and then how to become immortal, that's another way. But for this, we can see, this story is telling us how to, on the surface, you can say, how to deal with fortune teller. So fortune teller just observe what you have, and if you change it with him, basically the fortune teller cannot tell you what's going on and cannot make a proper prediction. I think that's what this story is about. So I will stop here, and then any comment or any question before I talk more about on this story. Remember, this story is in chapter 7, which is a philosopher king, and it's talking about how to become a good king, a Taoist king. So, Klim, please.
So should we assume that the master who was able so elegantly change his states, like once he was in the form of the earth, another time he assumed the form of the heaven, that he did that with a certain purpose in mind, like to maybe explain the Tao, or they explain a certain doctrine or philosophy to his student, and maybe the person that his student brought to see him. It's just for the exposition of a certain teaching. Is that, or was that just his natural reaction to what was happening? Like he was in a certain mood one day, and he just like decided to show off a little bit.
I don't know, but I would guess, he is playing with the wizard, because this wizard is so accurate, right? It's a supernatural accuracy. So all the people see him will run away, because yeah, I will run away, right? I don't want that guy tell me like, oh, something happened to you tomorrow, something like this. I don't want to hear this. So people run away. And then Hu Zi, the teacher, I think, he just want to tell his student this. Okay, the wizard just watch your essence, and then if you change it, then actually they cannot tell. So instead of being told what's going on about me, I'm going to control what you are going to observe. Okay, when you see me dying, I show the form of earth. I want you to see me as living, I show the form of heaven. Okay, so I think that's what he want to do, and he want to tell this. But
so he might have been just conforming to the other person's expectation, right? To kind of saying, yes, I am dying.
Yeah, conforming and then playing with him, and the purpose probably use this opportunity to teach this. Okay, and tell him that you didn't learn the essence, you only did learn the doctrine, and just like egg without sperm.
There's very once you think about that in that fashion, there's a very playful like ring to this whole story, even though there may be talking about serious things, and then they're all serious people, but they're kind of doing it in a kind of carefree way, which kind of leads me to the other story about the tortoise and the wiggling the tail in the mud, which I think is like the coolest image ever, and it's so carefree and so like simple.
Yeah, okay, great. Okay, any other comment, question on this one?
I guess it makes me think of that if we label something as one thing, it is inaccurate, because everything that is living is changing and growing and reforming like every day or in different moments. And so as soon as we say, oh, that thing is, that man is the wisest person on the planet, then or contrary, whatever they label it as, it's not necessarily true, because they can't be stuck as one thing. You know, it's always changing and forming, being alive in different parts of different elements as we live and change and grow.
Thank you. Any other comment? Okay, since no comment, I'm going to share my reading on this one. Actually, I like this story a lot. Okay, and I think the reason I like it is it tells me, okay, how does the physiognomy work? Okay, because people has many layers in your psychology, has many layers. And the physiognomist just read on certain layer of your psychology, and then tell you, try to predict what's going on, and I'll try to tell what's your your past. And if you understand your psychology well in many layers, and you can control it, so actually you don't have to believe the fortune teller. You don't have to believe the wizard. That's what I learned from this story. So that's it. And then I see anybody have a hands up? Rahid, you have a hands up? Or any comment? Rohit, you have a comment or not? Okay, so I assume there's no comment so far. So let me move on to the next one. Okay, let me talk about the mountain tree. Mountain tree is on chapter, I think it's on chapter 22. Okay, which is okay. This one is also a famous story, and then okay. So let me read the story, a short story. Zhuangzi, and technically Zhuangzi with his disciple, was walking on a mountain when he saw a large tree with huge branches and luxuriant foliage. A woodcutter was resting by its side, but he would not touch it. When he was asked by his disciple about the reason why he didn't cut the tree, he said it was good for nothing. The tree is totally useless. Then Zhuangzi said, this tree, because of its uselessness, is able to complete its natural term of existence. The tree can grow big and live for a long time because this tree is totally useless. Having left the mountain, Zhuangzi lodged in the house of his friends. The friend was glad and ordered his waiting dad, his servant, to kill a goose and boil it for dinner, basically. And the dad, the waiter, said, one of our geese can cackle and the other cannot. Which of them shall I kill? Okay, so during that time, the geese, I believe the geese were used for like a watchman. Okay, so when the stranger come, the geese were cackle. So the host said, kill the one that cannot cackle because it's useless. So the next day, his disciple asked Zhuangzi, right, saying, yesterday we saw the mountain tree that can complete its natural term of existence because of its uselessness. Now, for the same reason, the host goose died. Which of these positions would you must prefer to be? So here's a dilemma here, right? You want to be the useful or useless, right? So the Zhuangzi's answer, and I think his answer is interesting. It is worth to have a close look at Zhuangzi's answer. The Zhuangzi laughed and said, I would prefer to be in a position which is between the useful and the useless. This seems to be the right position, but is really not so. So he talked about between the useful and the useless. And I think that later on he talked about it seems to be the right position, but is not so. So he doesn't want us to think about find the golden means between the usefulness and the uselessness. He's talking about different things. Therefore, you will not put me beyond the trouble. But he who makes excursion in Tao and the De, okay, so wandering in Tao and the De, is not exposed to the trouble. Okay, so you don't want to stick with the certain Tao and the certain De, the virtue. He is above the reach to both praise and detraction, not like a dragon, not like a snake. He changes with time and has no insistence. He changes with time with never persistent. He is now high and now low, taking harmony as the measure. He enjoys himself at ease with the author of things. He used the word author. He treats things as things and is not being treated as sin by them. What can involve him in trouble? So here, Zhuangzi is talking about not useful, not useless, okay, but beyond the concept of you being used. So you don't be, you use, he treats things as things, but don't want to be treated as things. That's Zhuangzi's answer to answer about the tree and the geese, what kind of choice you want to do. So here, the important message here is what kind of tree you want to be, right? Be it a useful tree or useless tree. What kind of goose you want to be? Be the goose who cackle or goose who doesn't cackle? Fred, please.
This is interesting. I remember we did this quite a while ago, right?
Yes.
We had this story.
That's in chapter 4, chapter 4, when we talk about the usefulness of uselessness.
Yes, and that's what I took as the moral when we did it before. But here I'm getting something different because we're continuing on. And the last paragraph where he asks the question and then Chuang Tzŭ answers the question, gives a whole different take on it as far as I can tell, because there are lots of twists and turns to this. That it starts off a comparison of the useful and the useless. And normally you would think, of course, I'd want to be the useful. But then you recognize that the useful is cut down, like the tree and so forth. And so maybe it's better to preserve life, to just lie low and be the useless thing, at least useless to others, not be treated as a thing of a tactical thing by others to be useless. But then when he asks the question, Chuang Tzŭ answers and says effectively, like you mentioned, that no, that the preference would be to be between the useful and the useless, which is kind of the golden mean in between. So that changes. So it goes from maybe I'd want to be useful to maybe I want to be useless to maybe I want to be the golden mean. And then he immediately says, but that's not the right position either. And you know what, you want to transcend and go beyond that. And it seems you prefer some flexibility. It says now like a dragon, now like a snake. And so there are lots of twists and turns to this, and it takes a whole different depth, I think, than I had before. But I probably just misremembered it from before and made a real simple conclusion from it. But
yeah, I had forgotten all about the goose half of the equation. The story.
Yeah, if it been a useless goose, right, then you got killed. Let's put it this way. Yeah. So anybody have or Cream, you have a better solution?
Yeah, so I may be over speculating on this one, but notice how the wood chopper is saying that, you know, that this tree is like completely useless, while he is actually like maybe reclining or sitting by the tree and like enjoying the shade and the aesthetics. And so he's almost like contradicting himself there a little bit. It almost, and it has, it's actually, I would be curious to know when you read this in Chinese, whether that sounds a little bit comic, like that statement. And just imagine that whole picture, like a common folk, you know, you're basically like enjoying a good, you know, good situation, good position under the tree, and he's like, no, this tree is completely useless. And he's like almost joking at the same time. There's something absurdist about this in a way. And that I may be overstretching that a little bit, but that reminds me of the Aristotelian rhetorics, this whole idea that you should talk about reality when you discuss, when you talk about the reality, you should not be using exact, precise terms. Like mathematics is reserved for the heavenly bodies, for the you know, the heavenly, the God, pretty much for the like Platonic ideas. But when you talk about common things, you should be almost like contradicting yourself, or you should never be precise, like talk about it in poetic way, almost like be a trickster in a way, which actually that character laying under the tree and saying, no, this tree is completely useless, does sound like a trickster from the plain Indian culture.
Well, I think you have a great comment, and then I agree with you. When you read the Chinese, it's very poetic. Okay, so that's the way Zhuangzi or most of the Taoists create their philosophy. Okay, it doesn't never keep a very clear term. Okay, poetic. Okay, but if you ask me about comic, and my answer is no. It's quite serious. Okay, this one, that's nothing joking here. So that's what he's talking about. And I like to like your comment talk about the useless of the tree, right? He's sitting there resting next to a tree. If you read chapter 4, when talking about the human world, and when Zhuangzi talk about usefulness and the uselessness, he talk about the altar tree, right? The big, huge tree, okay, next to the temple. So think about the usefulness of this one. So, and look at the Zhuangzi's teaching. He means everyone should treat things as thing, and is not being treated as a thing. So you don't want being used as a thing. You want use other things as things. I think that's the point. So if you become an altar tree, okay, or a huge tree next to the temple, actually you are not being used, but you are beyond a thing, right? Because you at the some level not being used. Fred, please.
Yeah, the other thing I notice here is the introduction of you need some flexibility as you go through life and you go through time. It says he is now high and now low, taking harmony as the measure. So things change, and what is useful now becomes useless, and vice versa. So you need some flexibility. It brings to mind, you know, here in the Pacific Northwest, the yew tree, Pacific yew, was in silviculture, was for a long time considered a trash tree, because slow growing and just got in the way. You couldn't use it for timber, you couldn't use it for pulp or anything. So they would just throw it away. And then I think sometime in the 70s, maybe 80s, they discovered that they could use Taxol, which comes exclusively from the yew tree, for cancer treatment. It's a very effective cancer treatment, they discovered. All of a sudden, the yew tree went from one of the most useless trees to one of the most useful trees. All of a sudden, it became very expensive. and was treated like gold by the timber harvesters. So you have to stay flexible, sometimes now, sometimes low, at all the time taking harmony as the measure. It's just I think this is a real rich paragraph that will take me some time to figure out. Thanks.
Thank you, Fred. Okay, Steve, please.
Yeah, I'm actually wondering if there's more than one tree story, because I went back to look, because I didn't remember the goose half of this at all. And the place where I got it from doesn't have that, and it does include the comment about sitting under the tree that Clem said. I wonder if perhaps there's more than one tree story and we're confusing them, but I don't know the full repertoire enough to know the answer.
Yeah, you are right. Okay, if you look at the Zhuangzi as a book, okay, especially on the first 7 chapters, and especially on chapter 4, they're full of story about tree. They talk about ugly tree, different kind of tree. Okay, so you are right. There's many trees story on this. Okay, that's why some people suspect Zhuangzi, actually his job is a gardener. Okay, he's taking care of the trees. Okay, so it's a so because you are right. It's another
okay, because the story I'm remembering does favor the useless.
Yeah, another they talk about. So if you go back to chapter 4, okay, when he talk about human world, that's I don't know how many. That's one after another. They all talk about different kind of trees, and he has a different name of trees. So apparently he knows trees very well. That's why some people believe he's a gardener. So let's move on. Okay, so we were going to talk a few simple story. Okay, okay. This one I put the 3 story together. Okay, this one is the last 3 story in chapter 7 and chapter 17. Okay, so let's go this 3 story, and then we will see why. Let's discuss why these 3 stories put together. So sacred tortoise, right? So Zhuangzi was fishing on the Pu River when the prince of Tzŭ is a powerful state, sent 2 high officers to see him and said, "Our prince desire to burden you with the administration of Tzŭ state." They want to hire Zhuangzi. And Zhuangzi went on fishing without turning his head and said, "I have heard that in Tzŭ there is a sacred tortoise which died when it was 3,000 years old. The prince kept this tortoise carefully enclosed in a chest in his ancestral temple. Now, would this tortoise rather be dead and have its remains venerated, or will it rather be alive and wagging its tail in the mud?" "And you will be rather be alive," replied the 2 officials, wagging its tails in the mud. "Begone," cried Zhuangzi. "I too will wag my tail in the mud." I think this one is famous, and then I think the meaning could be very simple, right? Just to he enjoyed. The metaphor is like a turtle. I would rather live in the freedom. What I read is about freedom and life. That's more important than your reputation, and death, and sacrifice life, and wagging its tail in the mud become a quite famous metaphor for a lot of writing. Meta, please.
This one reminds me, not in outward form necessarily, of the beginning of the story of the wizard or shaman, where he says, "I have taught you the doctrines, but they're just like eggs that have been laid without a cock." And so this is like that. This has that sense of emptiness to it. Not that eggs that are unfertilized are empty, they're completely edible. But so this gives me the idea of sort of observing the forms of things and worshiping things that don't have life inside them.
Okay.
And that the general messiness of life is preferable to proper behavior and a high station.
Okay, thank you, Madeline. Okay, that's a interesting thought about. And during that time, especially in the southern state, they use tortoise and they call it the sacred tortoise, and they keep in the temple. Okay, let me move on to the next story. And this one I'm not including in the reading, but when I review it, I find out this one could be important in the whole reading. That's why I add this one. Okay, that's a short story. Huizi. Okay, here we talk about Huizi. If you read Zhuangzi talk about tree a lot, that's true. And he also have a dialogue with Huizi a lot. And Huizi, if you know, he is the we call it the philosopher in the school of names. Usually most of people consider him as a dialectician or sophist. Okay, so basically, or logician, depends on how you view it. So there's a lot of conversation in the Zhuangzi's writing. So Huizi was prime minister in the Liang state. This one could be historical truth because Huizi has been used, being worked for the government, and the Zhuangzi didn't in the Liang state. And the Zhuangzi was on his way to see him because it's his friend. Someone remarked, Zhuangzi has come. He wants to be minister in your place because according to the story, Zhuangzi is more capable than Huizi. So Huizi worried Zhuangzi may replace him, okay, take over his position. Therefore, Huizi was afraid and searched all over the country for 3 days and 3 nights to find him, to find Zhuangzi. Then Zhuangzi went on to see him and said, okay, then Zhuangzi he not only like to tell story, and also like in the story, he also tell different story. So here he tell Huizi another story. In the south, there is a bird. It is a kind of phoenix. Okay, phoenix that we consider as a holy bird. Do you know it? When it starts from South Sea to fly to the North Sea, it will not alight except on the Wutong, which is Polonia tree. That's kind of a holy tree, expensive tree. It is nothing but the fruit of bamboo. I think bamboo hardly have fruit. Somebody said every 100 years have a fruit, so it's very rare. So that means the phoenix, the birds, very picky, only eat the rest on the best tree, only eat the most rare fruit, and drink nothing but the purest spring water. And owl had got the rotten carcass, right, and of rat, and look up as the phoenix flew by and screech, are you not screeching at me over your kingdom of Liang? So he is used this metaphor to say, okay, I'm the phoenix, and who care about the rotten rat, right? So that's a story. Okay, the reason I put this one is tied to the next story, and probably this one is also one of the most famous story. And let me read this story, and then okay, Zhuangzi and the Huizi again. Okay, remember this one is chapter 17. Chapter 17, they talk about water, the autumn flood. Okay, describe a lot of water scene, and to the end, Zhuangzi put the story of sacred tortoise. Then put next day, after this story, put Huizi was the prime minister of Liang. Okay, talk about owl and the phoenix. Then to the end, Zhuangzi put this story, and most people just read the last story. But I try to do is to put these three stories together, and then you probably will see why Zhuangzi put the last story, the happiness of fish, here. Huizi and Zhuangzi and Huizi had strolled onto the bridge over Hao. Hao is a river. When the former, Zhuangzi observed, see how the small fish are darting about. This is the happiness of the fish. So Huizi is a sophist or a debater or logician. You are not being a fish yourself. How can you know the happiness of the fish? So the Zhuangzi replied, and you are not being I. How can you know that I do not know, right? So same logic. So Huizi replied, if I, not being you, cannot know what you know, it follows that not being a fish cannot know the happiness of fish. Right? Use the same logic, right? You said you are not me, so you don't know me. Then the same analogy, right? You are not fish, so you have no way to know the happiness of fish. Then last reply is interesting. Zhuangzi's reply. Let us go back to your original question, said Zhuangzi. You asked me how I knew the happiness of the fish. Your very question shows that you knew that I knew. I knew it from my own feel. I knew it on the bridge. Okay, so that's Zhuangzi's answer. So that's the end for this one. So for many, well, I talk about 1,000 years, people talking about what Zhuangzi means on the last one. Okay, so a lot of people so just lip service, they just for the sake of the debate, blah blah blah, and some people, some answer be about epistemology. So I think a lot of people probably familiar with this story. And if anyone have any thought on this one? Madeline, please.
Yes, thanks, Jason. Let's see. So some of it seems to be about the cleverness of argument, and that Chuang Tzŭ can keep up with, if not even outdo, Huizi. So you asked me how I knew the happiness of the fish. Your very question shows that you knew that I knew. So that would be the sophistry. I think the more profound and mystical part is I knew it from my own feelings on this bridge. I think an earlier translation we looked at said
okay, I know. I'm sorry, from my own feeling, basically that's I inserted. Okay.
It's so it's I know it. It wasn't an earlier translation, something like I know it because I am standing on this bridge.
That's right. So I'm sorry, I should remove this part. That's my insertion. Okay. Sorry.
It's all right. So to me, it suggests, first of all, here is the sage, the ascended master. He has an aerial view of things. In other words, he can survey the flow of everything from above. And furthermore, he's standing, so he is grounded in his own way, even though he's kind of up in the air. And so because he is completely centered in himself, he can feel the centeredness of other beings and know what their feelings are. Okay.
I think it's close to, or I will not say correct answer, but close to my answer. Okay. I'm sorry, I should not put this one here. Okay. And I put this one on, okay, if you know Chinese, okay, we translate as how can you know happiness, the happiness of fish. The Chinese word called 安之于之乐 mean an, okay. So Chinese word during that time, an has double meaning. It means how, also means where. So I think Zhuangzi's answer is, let's go back to your original question. You asked me how, okay, an, okay. So this time he interpret this word an as hui, where I knew the happiness of fish. So his answer is from the bridge, okay. So that's Zhuangzi's answer. So big question is we know Hui is a logician or sophist. Then Zhuangzi is play with him with another sophistry. Is that what the story means? Does that have bigger meaning? That's another way to look at it. Let's see how Mark and Steve. Mark, please. And Mark, you are muted.
Yeah, thanks, Jason. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah.
Okay. So I have a fairly unorthodox interpretation of this particular passage. And for me, the orthodox interpretation of this passage kind of demonstrates the power of personality cult. Like Chuang Tzŭ, the name of the book is Chuang Tzŭ. Chuang Tzŭ is the second most famous writer in Taoism. And typically I hear people interpret this interaction as Chuang Tzŭ besting Hui Tzŭ. But I see it completely opposite. To me, Hui Tzŭ won this argument hands down. And it's Zhuang Zi that reverted to sophism by saying, oh, your question presumes that I already know. Because literally, formulatively, how do you know this does presume that you do know it. But there could be an issue in translation here because, I don't understand the Chinese well enough to know how this translates. So I'm only just taking the English translation of it. So you might need to correct me on this. But it is very common for somebody to ask somebody how they know something in a way that they want them to explain the person's reasoning, their subjective reasoning, how they have come to the conclusion, how they know something. So they are generously conceding that they do know it to give them an opportunity to explain it. But the mere question itself implies that they don't believe that they actually do know it. At least that's the way it works in English. And to me, Hui Tzŭ's first argument about using exactly the same argument that Zhuang Zi used about him not being him is completely devastating. It annihilates Zhuang Zi's first argument, and he doesn't concede that. Instead, he changes the subject, which is a typical way that people who don't want to concede that their opponent has bested them, they change the subject to a different line. So he changed the subject when Hui Tzŭ defeated him on the first line argument. And then his second line of argumentation, at least in English, twists the meaning of what Hui Tzŭ said to imply that Hui Tzŭ has already conceded a point which he has not conceded, which he is contesting. So in my opinion, this discussion, just looking at it rationally, and I think most people, if you took the names out and they hadn't heard this argument before, they would believe that Hui Tzŭ had won it. But it's because of the prestige of Zhuang Zi, both in terms of him being the second most famous Taoist and in terms of the text that it comes from being named after him, prejudices people towards Zhuang Zi's interpretation. That's my impression. I'm interested in any comments you have, particularly on the translation issue. Thank you.
Mark, I agree with you on this one. But if you read this one if this one is a Hui's writing, right? They focus on sophistry, logician, okay, language, lots of. But this one is appear in Zhuangzi's writing, which is talk about Taoism, right? So I think even your interpretation is right. There's nothing wrong here. But my big question would be, why this one appear here, right? And what's the original purpose of this story? Let's go to Steve. Yeah.
First of all, I really appreciate your interpretation of that, Mark. Yeah, you're right. I mean, Chuang is the one that wrote it, so why would he have included it? And I was trying to remember, am I correct in remembering, like you said, Huizhi, if I'm pronouncing that incorrectly,
yeah,
I'm sure.
Yeah.
But that person comes up a lot. And am I remembering correctly that in the stories, Zhuangzi uses Huizhi as a foil in a lot of places? He's like the simple provincial leader trying to lead and comes at him with kind of all these kind of practical questions. And Zhuangzi is, he uses him as a foil in a lot of these, like the one before, I'm the Phoenix dude. I don't know what you're sitting there with your dirty old rat. And this one, am I remembering that correctly, that this character is used that way in a number of stories?
Yes, two persons show up often, right? One is Confucius, okay. One is
right, yeah.
Okay, and don't take
that's a different kind of foil, but yes.
Yeah. So usually they say Huizi is great, Confucius is great, but I'm better than them. That's how Zhuangzi write his book. Okay. Klim, please.
Right. So I saw Madeline put this comment in the chat, the problem of qualia in Western philosophy. And that was also, that I was kind of thinking along those lines as well. So I'm not the only crazy person. But it's, it sort of rings the bell, with this question, like what's it like to be a fish? And maybe the question is really not about whether fish can be happy or whether the fish can think, but it's about like the perception and I don't know if it's phenomenology. It's probably too difficult to draw the parallels there, but it's really about I guess the Chuang Zi being happy and kind of realizing, like standing there on the bridge, like, why am I happy? Well, and he kind of transposes that, his own happiness to the fish happiness, but that's how he realizes, I think, that he's happy just by looking at the fish. It's his own. And then how does he know that? Well, it's just something that was triggered by a certain experience. Maybe, I don't know, maybe I'm wrong there, but I think he eventually shifted that focus, right, from all this sophistry to really what's really more important, the sophistry, the thinking about whether fish can think or fish can experience, or what's the nature of our experience.
All right, thank you. Since we have talking about the C.I. Lewis qualia, talk about Thomas Nagel's how to be how do I feel become a bat, right? So I think that's an interesting discussion, but I still like to think back why this one, right? Since if you talk about sophistry, definitely Zhuangzi probably lose the debate, but why Zhuangzi put this here if he apparently lose, right? So why he put here, right? That's a big question. I have my own answer. Let's hear what Eddie wants to talk about.
Yeah, I was just going to say also, going on that it could be a projection of his own feelings. And if I was with him on the bridge, I would have said, how do you know they're not darting around in fear, for example? Right? Because how do you know they're not in fear, not happiness, but that getting to the point that it is his own projection of his own emotions, most likely.
Well, thank you. Well, I look at it a different way. Okay, that's why I decided to put this story here, and I think in this way, right? This story talk about the tortoise wagging its tail in the mud. He's happy. Here, talk about the owl. Okay, with the rotten rat, he's happy. Okay, and here also talk about happiness. Talk about the fish. How does the fish happy? And the question is the Chinese word "an." Okay, the key word "an" can double meaning how or where. So I think here Zhuangzi's answer is there's no absolute happiness. Okay, so you have your own happiness. You only know where. You don't know how. So the tortoise in the mud, you see probably in the terrible situation, but he's happy. but the only thing we know is not his happiness, is his where the tortoise is in the mud. All right. So I think that's Zhuangzi want to tell us, okay, the happiness is a question of where, the location, not how. That's I read, okay, for this one, and that's why I put these three story together. I think they are connected. So that's my own interpretation at this moment. But next year I probably have a different interpretation, just like everyone, you know, like Madeline probably read this one a few times, and then I believe we all have a different answer every time we read. So let's hear Rohit, please. Rohit, you muted.
Sorry. Right now I'm seeing number 6, but can we go to the one before number 5?
Okay, this one.
No, this one. No, the one before about the owl and the bird.
Oh, okay, that's between, yeah.
Okay, this is this is the one. So I just wanted to point out that there are two birds, the owl and the other bird, and the noble bird is vegan. Right? It's an interesting thing that even in China, such a long time ago, there was this feeling that being vegan is spiritually superior.
Yes.
Because this bird only drinks fresh water and it only eats the fruit of the bamboo.
Yes.
But the other one, the screeching owl, is eating the rotten carcass of a rat. So there's some feeling, right?
Some feeling?
China.
Yes, that's true.
That was my only comment.
Excuse me, is that a question? Okay, so I think time's up. So I just quickly go the last thing we talk about the death of Zhuang Zi's wife, and probably people already know this one, and then probably I will stop now, and then we have other opportunity to talk about more Zhuang Zi's story, you know, and then the Zhuang Zi's wife's death is also a famous story, and then we can talk about next time. So sorry for the time, and I have to make promise. I need to be strict on the time, for not only for myself, also for everyone. Okay. So next week we will talk about Bhagavad Gita. SK is coming to talk about. We change the subject. So I will stay here for another 5 minutes, and then I will put the recording stop. Okay.